and most successful companies share one thing: they develop their people. The Success Launch Point makes it simple with on-demand courses, live coaching, and a thriving professional community. Your team will gain confidence, sharpen skills, and deliver more value, while staying loyal to the company that invests in them. To take your workforce to the next level, check out modernobserver.com/launchpoint.
Hello, and welcome to the Success Showcase, the podcast that helps you succeed in your business life and career. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin, with the Modern Observer Group, and with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
I'm doing great. How about you, Eric?
Doing fantastic. As we record this, we are one day out of daylight savings time. And I have spoken to a number of people whose body clocks are all screwed up by the time change. So how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I mean, it's nice getting to bed a little bit earlier. Actually, I was watching the World Series, so it was nice not to have to do that last night, so I could go to bed at a reasonable hour. But
yeah, nobody watching the World Series went to bed early. I mean, this Game 7 went 11 innings, and at least that wasn't the 18 innings that the earlier games went.
that one I turned off. But this was like the best ever. But anyway, here we are in beautiful November. Halloween was last Friday, and we had a whole lot of wind Thursday and Friday, and blew off I don't know about you, but it blew off a whole lot of my leaves. So
Yeah, it's autumn in New England, so the leaves are almost gone, if not completely. We are heading into winter. And, you know, it's hard to believe, but 2026 is just around the corner.
wow.
So I don't know where the year went, but it's time to really plan out for the next year. And if you're a business owner, you need to figure out what that means for your workforce. So today, we're going to be talking about workforce development. We have a special guest with us, Joel Schwan. Joel, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I started my own business called Schwan Stratifier, which focuses on workforce planning. And for those that aren't too familiar, what is actually involved in workforce planning, what I typically do is provide workforce audits for companies that usually small to medium size that are looking to do like a current state assessment and process their mapping and gap analysis and learning to do project planning in regards to like resource and capacity planning and employer brand and role designs to understand how to structure their business better. And that can also lead into aspects of redesigning their onboarding and restructuring, doing their interview processes, and pretty much getting ready to bring people onto the bus that they're driving. So,
All right. Well, welcome. Now, sounds pretty complicated what you do. Let's see if we can boil this down a little bit. If you're a small business owner and you're just hiring and you're just starting to think about workforce development, what are some of the first things you need to pay attention to?
the biggest thing is understanding what your business goals are and how best to align those to your workforce needs. That's pretty much the root beginning of everything when it goes into planning. Which there's a bit more to it too, but you basically want to define your goals first, and then define your actual business strategy. And then once you've defined your strategy, you're able to do things like identify the current and future skills that are going to be required to help you reach those goals. A lot of businesses kind of like jump the gun and kind of just get the strategy going and then don't bother with the skills that they need. They think they know as far as like, well, I'm going to need someone to do the project planning. And then, for example, if they're like a game company, they need to bring on graphic designers, right? So but then they don't kind of like explain like or define the ways on how those people are going to move up with them when they start beginning to scale. They just kind of look at the present day versus the future aspect of things. And that's where you want to go into like planning your learning initiatives too, to fill the gaps preemptively and be able to evaluate and optimize your hiring costs with when you're going about and doing your recruiting. So workforce planning is the beginning part of everything, and being able to understand why and how to align those to your business goals will help, businesses, especially if they're small ones, learn to scale up with their actual workforce.
So you mentioned learning initiatives. Let's start there because recent surveys have actually shown that the current workforce is much more loyal to a company that gives them training opportunities and the opportunities to learn new skills.
Mhm.
So, particularly if you're a small business, how do you go about figuring out how to offer that? Never mind actually offering it.
There are multiple different ways of doing it. First, you want to make sure that when you're looking at upskilling and reskilling your workforce, and that includes like career pathways to map out clear ways for them to grow and progress. Um, you kind of want to first figure out what the roles that you have are that are the most, I wouldn't say the most important, but are pretty vital. And then how those are gonna like go up in the business scaling. So you could do ways of like learning initiatives as far as like there's softwares that you can put out there that actually have like little modules that your workers can take to kind of learn to help them like progress. It doesn't really count as far as like certifications, but they will help your workers kind of like educate themselves on a free basis while working for you. Some staffing companies are actually very good about doing this for their recruiters and their consultants, having worked for those kind of companies before. Like there's social platforms that will allow them to kind of like take a test or go through a couple modules of videos, take a test, and then if they pass, and then it kind of adds to their career pathway as they progress. And the company leadership can kind of look at that as they're progressing through their company, and that's actually a great way to get them free knowledge without having for you to fit the pocket for it, and for them not having to go out on their own to look for it. So that's one of my ideal ways of helping with the initial pathways for career development within your company. There's also other ways of doing it more educational wise and hosting more, I would say, like one-on-one meetings with group meetings. Sorry, not one-on-one, group meetings to kind of like help better understand things.
All right. And of course, there are all sorts of programs that businesses can take advantage of that allow outside organizations to handle the education. Um, Perfect example is because of my membership in the Chamber of Commerce, we have a partnership with one of the local colleges, and our employees get discounts to take their classes. They can sign up, do workshops there. So there are ways to provide learning pathways without you having to be responsible for providing the learning.
Yep.
Yeah, I noticed, t I like to go to the website to kind of prepare for who I'm gonna meet today, and I loved your, little bio there. It says, "You have a master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology," which sounds like a very, very interesting degree. It says it brings you so you can bring a unique blend of academic knowledge, consulting, and practical experience to the table, basically empowering people to navigate their career path. So tell me about the degrees themselves. I mean, is that something where a lot of people take it, or did you kind of make up your own self study to do that, or because it sounds like a very, very interesting background. It was probably very interesting doing it.
Oh, it was a blast doing it. I love psychology in general. When began my psychology journey, I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know I liked psychology, and I did like learning about behaviors. So, in my undergrad, I explored the entire giant tree of psychology where everything kind of branched off into. And industrial organizational psychology, or IO for short, is that actually was the most appealing to me because it talked about workforce behaviors. I like to describe it as more as like the analytical side of HR. Because it's a lot of the same learning that most people in HR do is, we're learning, but we're also kind of learning like the business consulting things as well. So we kind of like go over the foundations of like organizational development and working inside and outside of the organization. So some people confuse me with HR in that regard, where they're like, oh, so you do workforce planning. So you're obviously do HR consulting and do actual HR stuff. I was like, well, I do the consulting part of it, but my degree kind of helps me understand like the entire structure of the business like a sandwich. And so if I can see all the different types of layers and where those departments, including HR, kind of fit into or where they should be placed within that sandwich.
Interesting. So obviously, you said you started exploring the entire tree of psychology. And I love that analogy because psychology does go up into so many different branches.
It does. Neurodiversity is actually one of my favorites, is outside of IO psychology, but they kind of do a little bit hand in hand, especially when it comes to like understanding behaviors. And that's something I like to talk about on LinkedIn every so often is like the neurodiversity stuff as far as like what triggers us into believing certain things and or what makes us behave in certain ways. And that kind of plays a lot into how people will, respond. Your workers will respond when one, you're doing communications. And two, when you're looking to like restructure things, which we're seeing a lot of now in the workforce with businesses, Amazon, the certain types of restructurings. So sometimes the communication gets lost. In fact, there was a recent company that I read about in an article that promoted that their most ideal, or this year was like their best for like profits and revenue. But they also announced within the same breath, and this breath meaning like the same day that they're also like cutting some people off. And they initially started like a program, an exit program is what they called it, to help them kind of like find different spots within the business, which I do applaud the business for doing that, providing extra ways to move around in their organization. But announcing that at the same time you're doing a revenue thing kind of sends the wrong message. Yeah. And it's like stuff like that. It kind of like plays a big part in the psychology part of things is like, okay, I know you want to get this out of the way, but maybe wait a few days first before you do this. And that way that your workers are going to be less, I guess, annoyed at you and you'll have a better image too. Employer branding is a big thing. So
Yeah, that is a big problem in businesses because when they message, they're not taking the audience into account. And I had a situation, one of my early consulting projects, the company I was consulting for announced a restructuring, and they were very happy because this company was a Fortune 500 company and they had just recently purchased two other companies. So the point of the restructuring was to try to integrate the new companies and actually get everything more streamlined.
Mhm.
Of course, Wall Street applauded this. Corporate press was very favorable, and every employee I spoke to was horrified by the idea because they didn't know if they were going to have a job at the end of the restructuring.
Mhm.
So how does organizational psychology help businesses really solve that communications problem?
There's a lot of different ways. Really, it's kind of first we're trying to take into consideration your audience. A lot of businesses kind of focus on their consumers versus their workers as their audience. And what they sometimes forget is that their workers are their future consumers. Um, which I always thought would be like the first thing in the top of my mind when I have a workforce. But I guess that's something that need to be educated on. But yeah, it's if you take that into consideration and and assume that your workforce is going to be your future consumers, then maybe your approach to how you're going to deliver these news will change a little bit. I always recommend doing separating the positive from the negative when you're delivering news. You know, you want to be able to deliver the positive stuff first, and explains like how we're doing great, why everyone's contribution has helped us bring us this far, instead of making it seem like we're doing great, awesome, thanks for joining us. No, you guys helped us, and make them be the pillars. That is like the by far the best way to deliver and prepare people for the negative, which may come later. And unfortunately, restructuring is a natural part of businesses all across the globe and in every different sizes. Smaller going to scale to medium, medium going to scale to large, large is going to try to flatten itself to small again. I don't know, but the thing is that they try to find ways. Every company in every size tries to find ways to streamline certain things. So restructuring is a natural part of things, and sometimes that does involve having to let certain people go because either they're looking to minimize it, or they're looking to optimize, or they're looking to readjust them in a different aspect, and that may take some time down the road on what they're planning. But how you deliver that news and in the time frame that you deliver it, I think, is the most important aspect. And if laws like leadership kind of keeps that in mind, and that they're trying to help their employees, especially when they're like letting them go in the layoff situation we got going on, trying to find them room within that company versus just cutting them off, I think is going to make a lot of business stand out better. Because right now it's like the first thing that everyone wants to do when they want to cut costs is like, okay, we're going to deliver the bad news now. And then we're going to have some good news later on as far as like the company itself. But who's going to buy your stuff if everyone's out of a job? So being able to kind of keep those people within so you can keep giving them money so they can give you money, I think is like the most important thing.
Yeah, it is so important to take care of your workforce as a business owner. And I use this example all of the time. And of course, as often as I've done it, I always forget the name of the company, which is truly embarrassing. But in 2016, this was a Silicon Valley company. The CEO cut his salary to, I believe it was $70,000 a year, and raised the minimum salary of all of the workers to $70,000 a year. Now, this may not sound like a huge development for the workforce. Obviously, the employees enjoyed it, but it did more than that. It actually created an ownership feeling in the employees that they really had a say in what was going on with the company.
Mhm.
Fast forward to 2020, COVID hits, and the company is struggling to get through the pandemic. And the CEO announces that they may have to lay people off because their customers are not buying anything during the pandemic. And he's very open about it. The fact is, they don't have income. So it's possible that they may have to have layoffs. Every employee voluntarily took a pay cut to avoid those layoffs and keep the company going. Now, if the company hadn't been there for them 4 years earlier to help them out, they certainly wouldn't have returned the favor when the company needed it. Having an engaged workforce like that is crucial to a business's survival. Only for some reason, so many businesses fail to realize that.
I would say that's very that's a testament to the people believing in the mission that they're doing versus, companies that expect you to believe in their mission. There's a big difference in that, in in strategy versus tactical, with organizational development. So definitely, it is so crucial for your workers to believe in what you're doing, legitimately, that they're willing to go as far as, taking pay cuts voluntarily to help the business survive and, to avoid, unpleasantry of like the layoff so they'd be without a job. So that is a huge testament right there. And I apply it in companies that do it. I think the larger the companies get though, when we're looking at like large scales like Microsoft and Google, big boss companies like those, um, they one of the things I learned when I was a recruiter back in the day, was that there was a huge expectation that people should just want to work for them. And I always talk to hiring managers and I'd be like, first, one of the questions I'm always asking them is like, why would anyone want to come work for you? Well, why would they want this job? You know, basically to sell the job description, right? Cause they have competitors out there, this and nope, so, but the same response I always kept getting was that, "Oh, well, we're Microsoft or we're Google." And this was very common in like when I was hiring for like software engineers, and they always would that would be the answer all the time. We're Google, we're Microsoft. And that would be the end of it. And I'd have to ask them to elaborate a little bit more. I was like, well, what about this specific project? I mean, yeah, you're Google, you're Microsoft. It's awesome that you guys believe in your brand like that. But what if what if they're working for each other, right? Someone's working at Microsoft and they're applying for a Google role. Why would they want to come to you, vice versa? And so I think that's something that larger companies need to kind of work on a little bit more in making sure that their employees understand that, they're not the be all place to be all the time. There should be reasons, and you should have valid descriptions as to why someone will want to come work on a specific project. Because now even though it is a buyer or a employer's market out there, I mean, it always usually is, but you got to if you want to appeal the right talent, and if there are specific companies that you're targeting that you want to come from them to you, then you need to kind of get better explanations about that. And I think that's more than just like talking about your mission and then pointing to it and being like, this is what we're doing. This is how cool we are. Okay, cool. A little bit more would be appreciative as to how does this serve them? How are they gonna grow within your company? I mean, why jump from one stable company to another? So that's kind of one of the things I like ask them to kind of like consider.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of it has to do with, you're talking about having a positive, engaged workforce.
Yeah.
And I mean, what that does, number one, it starts with the employees. Because if you don't have happy employees, they're just coming into work day to day and they're getting more and more miserable. So they're likely to leave anyway. So providing the learning opportunities that you're talking about and keeping them involved in these different things is so, so important, because the most important thing for the company itself, besides their employees, is obviously the consumer out there. And I think the consumers out there are they are going to realize, after dealing with the company long enough, how the company operates on the inside. It can't help but show through the people that are there. So
Mhm.
obviously the psychology of that is a whole lot. So I'm sure you work a whole lot with managers and business owners and so on and so forth on that first. And okay, how can we make this work for your employees? I would imagine that's probably part of the survey that people take up front, as far as how do you perceive these things inside your company.
Yeah, doing like the workforce audit specifically. What I'm typically doing is, besides if they let me look at their data, I will do an analysis on that part, which I love to do. It actually goes back with my degree. But also having the conversations with their departments too, as like the communication that's going on and what do the resources kind of look like? Do they need to like update their handbooks, for example? And that's actually, I got a bit of a webinar coming up soon too, about probably in 2026 here, where I'll be talking about your handbooks and how they should be written these days. A lot of companies kind of like just throw all the necessary information into them and kind of forget about uh what the handbook really should be about, which is like engaging your new hires from day one. Most people don't even look at their handbooks until they actually need them, like a policy
Yep.
or when you need to take PTO. And it's like the only time they ever pick them up. Half the time they forget where they even put them if they're not digital. So one thing I kind of recommend for companies to kind of reconsider is like how you're writing your handbooks and make them more engaging. I think the best companies are Netflix and Valve that kind of do this really well, as examples for how the handbook should be written. They kind of make it more engaging. Netflix actually has like little images in their handbooks to kind of make it kind of cool. I've made mock handbooks before where I actually use memes that I've posted on LinkedIn as to stress points for the new hires when they're looking to be onboarded. But things like that, it kind of make it more engaging, less about the bureaucracy of things in the company and more about like, how you going to grow and how we can do certain things, how you can contribute, how we can contribute to you. These are the valuable resources here and so on and so forth. I think that starting with like simple things like resources and handbooks, I think will help with the continuous development of your company, and it will show like support and help your workers kind of understand like, where they can move with their roles throughout the company, and kind of help with like team dynamics too when they're brought on board and how they can like, you know, become more cohesive with the team that they're hired with. So
Yeah, we talked a lot in the past as far as operations manuals on the inside and getting employees involved and doing the processes, but also assessing the process and modifying things because things are constantly changing. And the more you get people involved with that, where they have ownership of what's going on, which includes helping to write the employee manual as you're going through this. I would imagine that's something that you would emphasize big time as far as the companies go, because otherwise, again, they're just going through the motions every single day. And if they see that something's wrong, they're probably not encouraged to speak up about it. So just go and
yeah,
whatever
and
they
yeah, like handbooks are like the most basic too. I mean, I would say also like look into like leadership development, introducing programs for potential managers to kind of learn how to engage with your workers too, and how to utilize those resources like handbooks and SOPs to kind of like showcase to your new hires and engage with them right away. The most common thing most people do is just send out like a welcome email, right? I do want to stress though to some managers that, and this is something I've seen pop up on other social media like Threads and Twitter a couple times where people complain is like, don't offer work right away when your new hire is about to start. Let them finish what they're doing first at the previous job that they're at. And all you really need to do in your welcome emails is just communicate that you're looking forward to working with them. Here are some resources that they can look at when they have time, but don't say, we got heavy or have a lot of projects to work on here. Or here's the thing. If you can look at these projects before you come on board, that'd be great. You know, don't make their lives stressful. Just let them know here are the resources to help them in the company once they're onboarded, what they can do to reach out to you. And then you look forward to working with them on such and such day. And that's all you need to do. So, but
So
yep. Yeah, definitely like doing like leadership development programs, I think is a good way to kind of leverage and help your internal teams do better.
fantastic. We are just about out of time. So before we wrap up, if our listeners want to get more information about your company and what you do, how can they do so?
Best way is to go to my website at www.schwanstratifier.com. Um, there's also, you can look me up on LinkedIn, Joel Schwan. I think there's too many Joel Schwans out there, but you can find out my LinkedIn is too. I'm very engaging on there.
All right. So, Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for our listeners this week?
actually the one that you just mentioned at the end, which I hadn't heard of, but it makes so much common sense, is when you're welcoming the employee in instead of putting the gun to your head saying we need you right now, allowing them to do that because that brings them into a culture of welcoming immediately, and obviously their mindset coming in the door, I think, is going to be a whole lot more positive. So these, I think, obviously, with your industrial and organizational psychology, are really, really important things. But obviously, it's so important to get an outside assessment from somebody like you to see what's going on with the company. Have an open mind, because if you don't, You may be successful now, but eventually it's going to come back and bite you.
And before we leave, I will say one thing that's pretty important for a lot of people that I work with is that first you have to admit that you have a problem. So keep that mentality in mind. It's a lot like, Alcohol Anonymous, really. You got the first step is admit that you have a problem. And then therefore afterwards we can work together and I can help you. So
Yeah, I think for me, the big takeaway is just the importance of consciously creating a corporate culture. So many businesses, the culture happens by accident through various hires. And if you're not doing it on purpose, you're going to lose control of it. You're not going to have your employees be as engaged. So it really is important to keep that culture in mind when you're hiring, when you're putting together your strategic plans, and most importantly, when you're figuring out what your goals are. What is that culture that you want to have that's going to make it easier to accomplish those goals? You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch every episode at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcast app, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.